Did you know that the people of ancient Pompeii did not speak Latin, or that the Etruscans of central Italy spoke a unique and mysterious language, unconnected to any other language? It is little wonder that many Italians today speak dialects, which can be hard for others to understand. It reflects how the Italian peninsula has been for thousands of years, a linguistic mishmash. But before we go back to the Romans, and even further back in time, let's say a few words about spoken Italian today. It mainly comes from the so-called Vulgar Latin, spoken on the streets by ordinary Romans in classical times. Classical Latin, as studied in certain elite schools today, was literary and ecclesiastical, which is why Latin is not as easy to understand for Italian speakers as you may think. After the fall of the Roman Empire, the Latin language developed differently from region to region, until eventually it became different languages such as French, Spanish and Romanian, which, although clearly related, were no longer mutually understandable. Within the Italian peninsula, dialects developed such as Neapolitan, Romanesco, Sardinian, Sicilian, Venetian and goodness knows what. It's important to remember that these dialects are not inferior versions of Standard Italian, which have deviated from the real thing. They predate Standard Italian and should be seen as cousins rather than inferior offspring. Standard Italian is, after all, essentially the dialect of Tuscany, which came to dominate in the newly united Italy of the 1860s. Today, dialects remain alive, and in some regions they are still widely spoken at home, especially by older generations. Even those that speak Standard Italian often will still use words from the local dialect. These linguistic differences within the Italian peninsula are usually attributed to the many invasions and occupations of the various regions, and the relatively recent unification of the country. However, I like to see it as a return to what was normal thousands of years ago, when many different languages were spoken across the peninsula, and before Latin, the language spoken by the Romans in the area known as Latium, or Lazio, came to dominate. It is thought that long before the rise of Rome, the wandering tribes which spread into the peninsula from the east spoke an Italic language which was part of the Indo-European language family, which includes languages as different as English, Persian, Greek, Russian and Hindi. The ancestor language is not known from any inscriptions or historical sources, but is presumed to have existed based on common elements shared by its successor languages, such as Latin, Oscan and Umbrian. Oscan was spoken in southern Italy and is thought to have survived in everyday use until well into the times of the Roman Empire. Oscan graffiti has been found on the walls of Pompeii, and was likely written shortly before the eruption in 79 CE. Other Oscan graffiti exists elsewhere from around that time, but it's rare to find much evidence of it, as Roman citizens were usually not proud of their non-Latin speaking ancestors. Oscan had much in common with Latin, but interestingly used an alphabet derived from Etruscan, even though the languages themselves were entirely different. The Umbrian alphabet is likewise of Etruscan origin, with a backward C, and like Etruscan is written from right to left. The Umbrian language is mainly known through tablets found in 1444 in Gubbio, which set out the sacred laws of the Umbrian city from around 200 BCE. Umbrian was mainly spoken on the eastern side of the Tiber, with Etruscan dominating to the west. As for Etruscan, nobody knows for sure what the origins of the Etruscans were, but genetics suggest they may have come from an area which now forms part of Turkey. They were one of the most dominant presences in pre-Roman times, but we only know their language through a handful of words quoted by Roman authors and inscriptions, most of which are on Etruscan tombs, and tell us relatively little about the wider language and context. The process of deciphering Etruscan is ongoing, but experts are increasingly confident that Etruscan was not an Indo-European language, and is unconnected with any other living languages today. I am hoping to do a video about the Etruscans, but they're so damn mysterious it's hard to pin them down. One thing that is clear, though, is that they greatly influenced the early Romans, and through them, particularly via the alphabet, they continue to influence us today. I hope you found this video about the main languages of the Italian peninsula interesting. If you'd like to know more, please feel free to like and subscribe, and there will be another video about something Italian along shortly.